So hello and welcome, and in this video we're repairing and modifying a Atari Lynx 2 by replacing its capacitors and then installing a BennVenn screen for it. So as you can see, I'm currently replacing the capacitors around the board, and this is a pretty standard affair. It's just use a desoldering gun. You could use other ways of getting the capacitors off as well. You could just heat the legs and pull. There's various ways to do it, but I prefer to use a desolder gun. So yeah, and then just pop the new capacitors in, solder them in place and clip the legs, which is exactly what you can see me doing here. So there's not much more to say on this step of the video, so I'm going to go quiet and I'm going to treat you guys to just a little bit of background music just to keep things moving along.
I can feel you in my heart, lost in the desert, but we'll stay together, wander forever, we'll stay together in the night. We'll stay together, lost in the desert. We'll stay
So now we'll get the BennVenn install. So as you can see on the left here, we've got a 3D printed orange bracket, and below that we've got the BennVenn screen itself. And what we're going to do is just reattach this front plate here that you can see me screwing in, because I'd already disassembled this once before, and get it back together. So that's good, and now we just want to give this a quick blast with some compressed air, get rid of any loose dust so there's nothing behind the clear screen there, and then we'll pop the BennVenn in, peel off the screen protector on it, and just pop it right in. And then we'll take this 3D printed bracket and fit it over the top, and what that'll do is hold the screen in the exact position it needs to be in, and then we'll get that screwed in as well. Just there we go, just like that. And once we've got all these screws in, we'll be able to test that the BennVenn works or not and go from there. And there we go, that is now all securely fastened. So then we'll just pop this ribbon cable onto the BennVenn PCB right there. And that's it, that's good. That's now ready to be installed. So what we'll do is we'll take the PCB and we'll pop it in and get all the cables connected up and take this for a whirl and see how well it's worked or not, as may be the case. So I'm just popping out these locking mechanisms on these ribbon connector sockets, and that will just allow the cables to slot in. Now this is probably the most frustrating part about reassembling any Atari Lynx. These ribbon cables are an absolute nightmare, and it is for this reason actually that I really immensely dislike working on the Atari Lynx 2 console. It is just extremely fiddly and time consuming and just generally all around quite irritating, in my opinion. Particularly the cable just to the left of the one I'm working on right here. That cable is the cable for the buttons on the front of the console, and it has carbon traces. And those carbon traces, when going into the socket that connect it to the main PCB, have a habit of just sort of crumbling away. Because again, carbon traces are not really made for this kind of thing, in my opinion. It was a really poor decision on behalf of Atari. Although recently, Retro 6 have started offering these ribbon cables, so if you do happen to damage or otherwise destroy your cable, you can buy a brand new one for £5.99 UK pounds, which honestly is probably worth it just to save yourself the time and hassle of having to repair one of these, because they're just so incredibly awkward. And even these LCD ribbon connectors are awkward. You can see here I'm doing my best to get that to go in, and it's just, look at it, it's just really struggling to go in, and it just pops out, and yeah, it makes a person want to yell at passing by pigeons. It is not fun. It really is not fun. So as you can see, what I've done is disconnected that cable from the BennVenn board, and I'm actually just popping it onto the main PCB board via this socket first instead, and then I'm going to try and maneuver that in after the fact, because it really is that difficult and irritating to get these in. And again, this is a bit fiddly too, but it's far less fiddly than dealing with the socket on the main board. And now for the cable I always hate, because this one has a habit of crumbling. The button cable. We'll just kind of maneuver it in gently. And then we'll push that locking mechanism down to hold it into place. And hopefully that should do the job. There we go, that's more or less together. Again, I personally don't recommend the Atari Lynx 2 as a console to work on or modify or anything like that. It's, for me at least, it is not enjoyable. But, you know, it's still nice to keep these things out of landfill, keep them going, and, you know, there's always a happy collector or two out there to have these. So, you know, it is still nice to keep them going. So now we'll just secure this this battery thing in place. This screw I'm using here, it's a little bit too long. It's not holding it secure, so what I'm going to do is just shorten this screw a little bit, just to make sure that it holds it flush without protruding from the plastic. Now, my more astute viewers, or viewers who've done this before, may have noticed I've missed something. I've missed the backlight cable that connects to the BennVenn board and to the rear of the board near where the button socket goes. So what we're going to do here is connect the backlight cable here on the main PCB. And I'm just going to add a little bit of flux so that that flows a bit better. This is quite an awkward angle to do this on. This is probably not the best way to solder this. It's probably better to solder this cable before putting everything together, but I didn't realize that I really needed to do that. On this particular revision of the Atari Lynx board, when you switch it on, the screen will not come on automatically, the BennVenn replacement screen. And that is an issue with the Atari Lynx 2 board not providing a V-blank signal when it's switched on. So you end up with a black screen with nothing on it. You'll hear the sound, but just have a black screen. You do need to wire this cable up if you have this particular BennVenn LCD mod, because if you don't, you won't actually be able to activate the backlight, in which case you're not going to have an image. So we've got to put this in. As I'm doing here, I know I've not quite got this on camera properly, so apologies for that, but you know, we make do as best we can. There we go. So as you can see, I've also off camera soldered the wire to the correct part of the socket connector on the rear as well, which I think you may have just seen a second ago. Now I'll pop a game in, and we'll take it for a spin and see if this has worked. So we'll just connect up the benchtop power supply with the battery terminals on the Atari Lynx 2, and this just means that I don't need to get the whole thing reassembled enough and then have to use AA batteries. You don't necessarily need to do this step if you have an official Atari Lynx power cable, but I don't, so I'm just feeding it power through the battery terminals. So we'll switch that on. So let's try the backlight button now. Oh, and there we go. So my suspicion there was we had audio. So it was the same problem I encountered before, which I didn't capture on film, unfortunately. But there we go. And as you can see, you have to use that backlight button to get a display. It's a minor inconvenience, and there is a BennVenn display that is able to get around that problem. But there we go. So, and if we hold that down, we can see it cycling its different render modes and scale modes as well, which is kind of cool. But yeah, that's quite a nice display. It's very bright, very clear. The scaling is very nice. It's much nicer to look at than the original LCD display that came in this. It is a worthwhile mod to do, but I suggest making sure that you get the correct BennVenn display for your particular Lynx revision. I had absolutely no idea about that issue until after this mod was done and doing a little bit of research, so hopefully it will save you a little bit of time knowing about that as well. But as we can see here, I'm just thinking, oh, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just this cable isn't connected correctly or something like that. It's not the case. It's not the case at all. It really is down to the BennVenn board and an incompatibility with a very specific revision of this Atari Lynx 2 main PCB. I believe AtariAge.com has some information on that problem as well. I vaguely remember that's where I read it, but it's been a little while since I looked at that. So yeah, let's get this thing all back together again anyway. We'll just make sure we get all these screws in sufficiently tight as well. You don't want to over tighten them and strip the screw holes or anything like that, but you want them in tight enough to hold this thing together, because there are only 4 screws holding it together. There we go, we'll get the batteries in now so that we can test. There we go. Let's get this into view. We can see we've got power. So if we hold that, and there we go, check it out. Amazing. So that's it. We've pretty much successfully modified this. Ow, 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 ow. I'm getting battered. I'm getting absolutely smashed by these robot thingies. The Electro Cop is not doing well. Look, he's getting cornered. I also think I'm out of ammo at this point, or energy for the gun or whatever. I don't think I can actually fight back. Yep, there we go. I'm dust. And that's it. It's game over. Interestingly, I can't actually figure out how to get out of this game over screen. It's just sort of stuck on. Like, the buttons are responsive, I can pause it and stuff, but, you know, nothing's happening. Pressing the arrow buttons. That's not doing anything. Now I've turned off the backlight, and oh god, why did I turn off the backlight? Why do I do this to myself? Why? We'll hold that down and get the display back, hopefully. Again, these aren't actually the most sensitive of buttons. They're kind of annoying. There we go. And then I've turned it off again. There we go. We've got it back. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, it works, and das vidania.